Hey, I'm Bill Latka. I help NMEAC with their communications and website stuff, and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. Turn off this music. We are very happy to have you. There's a lot going on, and we realize that this is a very fraught time. That we look at the fires in California, and you think, wait a minute, there's something going on here, and I think all of us on this call know what's going on. So we are so lucky to have with us today Peter Sinclair, who is a climate videographer. He's a climate communication specialist. He does a lot of work with the Yale School of Climate Communications and other stuff. And he's a videographer that has been around the world and spoken to hundreds of scientists, if not thousands, about climate and energy issues. So we are very, very happy to have him here tonight. So let's all give a big wave to Peter. Peter.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll see if we can share screen here. This worked before, so.
And while Peter's doing that, if you want, in the upper right hand of your window, there's a view icon, and you can turn it to speaker. And that way you'll see Peter up pretty large, and then when he shares his screen, like he just did, you can see that bigger.
There we go. Give it just a second here to warm up. There we go. Okay, so it's been a frightening week. And this is some of the most frightening video that I have seen, particularly because of that dog.
Hi, you're gonna be okay.
Because it reminds us of the billions and billions of creatures and human beings
Don't worry about that, man.
who had very little to do with creating this problem,
Okay.
but are nonetheless faced consequences. And I have no idea whether, I assume that the person who took this video made it out of there. But honestly, I don't know. And none of the reporting that I've seen has any guidance on that. But it is nonetheless sobering. And the pictures continue to be horrifying. And like every, like the joke says, every horror movie begins with someone ignoring a scientist. And indeed, 20 years ago, exactly this kind of event was predicted in peer-reviewed literature. Scientists said that a Santa Ana wind occurrence like this may significantly increase the extent of California coastal areas burned by wildfires, loss of life and property. So it was just a prediction then, but now it's a reality. This video is very timely. I put this together a few weeks ago. This gentleman is Chris Wright. He is a multi-millionaire gas executive and the nominee for Secretary of Energy in the new Trump administration. He has said some controversial things about in the way of climate denial. And the way climate deniers do it more and more nowadays is they kind of recognize they got to at least pretend to put a science gloss on what they're saying. So he made some claims that he said were coming from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report of 2020, which is pretty authoritative. So make sure you've muted everybody. So I called a friend of mine who happened to be a lead author of that report, and in fact, the particular section that Mr. Wright referenced, and as always, hilarity ensued. So I'll just play this and we'll all learn something together.
There is no climate crisis, and we're not in the midst of an energy transition either.
Chris Wright is an oil and gas executive and nominee for Secretary of Energy in the new Trump administration.
What about extreme weather, you ask? We have seen no increase in the frequency or intensity of hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, or floods, despite endless fear-mongering of the media, politicians, and activists. This is not my opinion. This is the facts as contained in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports.
Mr. Wright's claims and statements about what the IPCC report says are demonstrably incorrect.
The Washington Post reports that recent claims made by Mr. Wright about the findings of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, are incorrect, according to the scientists who authored the relevant research. Jim Cawson is a research scientist retired from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and a lecturer at the University of Wisconsin. Dr. Cawson is a lead author of the most recent IPCC report, in particular the section cited by Mr. Wright.
It's remarkably simple to show this. Our executive summary in Chapter 11, which is extreme events and relationships to climate, very clearly in a very short time, 3 pages, with very easy to read bullet points, claims quite different result. His are not at all in alignment with what our report says. Our confidence with the relationship between climate and extreme events varies by what type of extreme event we're talking about. We have very high confidence in the relationship between temperature extremes. So that would be heat waves and, of course, things like Arctic outbreaks and things like that. That would be a cold extreme. In those cases, we use words like virtually certain that these things are changing to become more intense or more frequent or both, and virtually certain that human actions have played a substantial role in this. So that's where we start. If we drop down to extreme precipitation events,
in one town around Valencia called Chiva, it experienced more rainfall than it normally gets in 1 year in just the span of 8 hours. So really seeing some horrific imagery coming out of that.
So we have high confidence that extreme precipitation events are increasing in intensity and frequency, and that human actions are playing a substantial role. If we switch next to something like drought, we still have good confidence that drought extremes are increasing and that human actions are playing a role.
And this is a result of climate change. You're seeing water scarcity, drought in some cases, and then when those torrential floods do come, the earth no longer has the capacity to actually suck up that water, and it just runs rabid.
When we get to tropical cyclones, which includes hurricanes, our confidence varies from medium to high.
It's just an incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific. The seas are just so incredibly hot, record hot, as you might imagine. You know what's driving that. I don't need to tell you. Global warming, climate change, leading to this and becoming an increasing threat.
Our confidence is high that climate change increases the intensity of storms, that it increases the proportion of the strongest storms, the Saffir-Simpson category 4 and 5 storms. It increases the amount of rain generated by these storms. These are the things that we have high confidence in.
Yeah, so we're seeing more of these extreme events. This is a graph of that area of near Valencia, Spain, where which was referenced in the preceding video. And the gray lines that you see there are the daily cumulative rainfall totals over the course of the last the preceding 13 or 14 years. And this is 2024. So we're seeing more of these events that are so extreme that they absolutely shatter our notions of what is normal and what is not. Another example would be this graph from Phoenix, Arizona. It is every red dot shows year by year, the number of days over 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you can see that it's been steadily rising over time, but really remarkable over the last 3 years. So we're seeing a lot of graphs like these where suddenly something just like absolutely departs from the baseline or any kind of norm that we've seen in the past. The most recent global temperature records have now been published by NASA and the other half a dozen or so groups around the planet. They all show the same thing. 2024 was the warmest year on the modern record, and 2025 is starting out very warm indeed. What's really sobering is to look at the quote unquote cool year of the last decade and to recognize that those cooler years would have been unprecedentedly warm years just a decade or two ago. So the coolest years going forward will be warmer than what the warmest years were 20 years ago, and that trend is going to continue. And so a lot of people might be asking, okay, so why am I so cold? Well, if you look at this graph from the University of Maine, the reds are warmer than average places, and the blues are colder than average. And so you look at North America and you see that the eastern United States is much, much colder than normal, and all the warm air appears to be up in the Arctic. And we are seeing this pattern more and more with climate change, with these Arctic outbreaks where big blobs of cold air come down here and it pushes warmer air up into the northern latitudes. And so it's been an exceptionally mild January in Alaska, and might actually be a record warm January. It was just a few days ago, 53 degrees Fahrenheit in central Alaska. And this is Matthew Capucci, who's a very dynamic young meteorologist with the Washington Post, just making some remarks on these kind of observations and what they pretend.
Everybody has innately some level of risk they're comfortable with. If you live in Oklahoma, you understand that tornadoes are a part of life there, and you hope that in your lifetime it doesn't impact you. Maybe 1 out of every 20 people there has been hit directly by a tornado and lost their house. Those are odds that people there sort of have to stomach every day. Same thing in Florida with hurricanes. In California, same thing there. The issue is that you're exactly right. The scale is sort of tipping more towards disaster being more likely in people's lifetime, especially with the patterns of sort of longer stretches that are either very wet or very dry. And once California gets into one of these very dry stretches, it just desiccates the landscape and makes it so ripe to burn. We normally see the rainy season kick in by November, December, even in Southern California. That just hasn't happened yet. So the winds are usually the strongest in January, but by then the rain comes in. It's not so much of an issue. This time around, we got the winds that we normally get, but we didn't get the rain. And that's why it's such a big problem right now. And one thing to note too, as part of the conversation, the first place we can always look to see if our risk is changing is Wall Street, and is the insurance companies. And so many insurers are pulling out of California, are pulling out of Florida as risk increases. And I think that's the writing on the wall that we sort of have to live with.
And that's a really absolutely essential point to make, is that the ticking time bomb referenced in this article is home insurance. The Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell testified to the Senate Budget Committee last year that the increasing price of home insurance was one of the leading drivers of inflation that we're still seeing, and it's going to get worse in the future. As Bloomberg reported, 39 million homes are insured against natural disasters. And the Financial Times showed that home insurers are suffering increasing losses over recent years, and it's due to the increasing frequency and severity of weather-driven losses. Here in Midland, where I live, a few years ago, I was contacted out of the blue by a very conservative Republican insurance agent who was very experienced in the industry, very, very conservative, but had questions about climate change. And I've had several conversations with him since then, but he wrote to me about a year ago. In my 30 years, I've never seen anything like what is happening right now. I sit on several different advisory boards, and insurance companies are scared to death about the trends they are seeing. You're correct, it's not just coastal areas either, which, by the way, are nearly impossible to insure right now. I had 2 houses last week in Hilton Head where the premium went from $12,000 to over $30,000, and they were lucky to get the $30,000. There was nothing else on the market. And I should point out that it's not just Florida, Texas, California, Louisiana. The New York Times had a piece about 6 months ago where they pointed out that 18 states now, there are 18 states where home insurance companies are not profitable. And Michigan was one of them. And those are the states where insurance rates are going to be rising fastest. So it's not just Texas and California, it's Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan that are seeing these kind of rate rises. And it's largely due to increased extreme weather, and it's not going to change. So I could go on and on and on talking about scary stuff about climate that's happening, and I'm happy to do that for anybody that wants to invite me. But what I want to do tonight is talk about what we're going to do going forward, because obviously we've had a recent election that is going to be pretty impactful in this area. A lot of people are unhappy, angry, frightened, depressed, you name a whole range of emotions. I want to talk about what levers we have to still pull at the local and state level, and there are many. And we have markets, and we have technology, and we have history on our side. So there's at least some reason to be guardedly hopeful that we have steps that we can take moving forward. But first, I want to address this kind of teapot tempest that's come up on social media over the last 10 days or so. This is an item from the Express Tribune, which is a Pakistani news outlet. And it has a news item here about Michigan. Michigan is a sarcastic headline: Michigan to save the planet by clearing 420 acres of forest to build solar. And I'm trying to turn off this little okay thing up here. Just a second. Okay. And so we saw a whole lot of social media, like this gentleman from the esteemed Mackinac Center, very conservative fossil fuel lobbying firm, talking about this horrible scandal of cutting down trees to put up a solar farm in Gaylord. And he's standing in front of a bucolic forest scene complete with a babbling brook and pristine white snow. We saw some third string backbencher Republican legislators try to get on the bandwagon, get their TV time. Fox News weighed in, fallout over far left climate agenda, and expressed their own fake outrage on this story. But that still doesn't explain why they would care about this in Pakistan. And why would they have a picture of like a rainforest that anybody that lives in Michigan knows that this is not a Michigan forest? And the answer is that it is a well-known ploy on social media to create news stories that will be clickbait that will be irresistible to keyboard warriors who will find them on search engines. So they'll show up on a search engine if somebody clicks Michigan solar. They'll see this picture of this gorgeous, I don't know, Costa Rican rainforest and assume that must be Michigan. And what a terrible thing. And this was actually posted on a Facebook site here in Michigan. So it made a complete round trip from some lobbying firm here in the States, I'm sure, to Pakistan and back. So there are hundreds of these Facebook echo chambers, and that's what we're contending with in terms of the information battle that we face. Now, here's the actual land. The actual story here, first of all, is that there was no intention by any solar company to put any solar farm on state land near Gaylord. The idea was floated by people in the DNR because they have marginal land, such as this, crisscrossed by transmission lines. There are no fewer than 14 oil and gas wells on this land, as well as large tracts that are slated to be clear cut for biofuels and for lumber. So this is pretty well degraded land, and there is a plan for a solar farm on private land, not too far away in the same township. And so the DNR floated the idea maybe that company would be interested in using some of this land, which would produce more revenue for the community and some revenue for the DNR, which is badly needed because there just aren't as many hunters and fishermen buying licenses as there were 30 years ago. So it was an idea that was floated, but it was never, there was the developer looked at it, turned it down almost a year ago. So the whole idea that there was some imminent proposal for a solar farm anywhere near Gaylord on state land was completely bogus right from the get-go. This is the satellite view of that land. The red lines are the transmission lines, and you can see how they're the swaths are cut through the forest there. You can see the boundaries of the 420 total acres here. This is state land. And you can also see where those red lines crisscross up here. There's a big electrical substation close by. So this is a fairly industrialized area between the electrical infrastructure, the oil and gas infrastructure, et cetera, and the lumbering that's going on. So you can also see big areas of this that are completely barren of trees. This particular area was scoured right down to the turf in 2022 by a very unusual F2 tornado. I would say obviously climate enhanced, because tornadoes are so rare as to be non-existent up in northern Michigan, so rare that Gaylord has no warning system. When this tornado hit Gaylord, there was no way for people to be warned. In southern Michigan and the rest of the Midwest, every town has a warning siren, but they never saw the need for one in Gaylord because they just never had storms like this. But it came through and scoured this part of the woods here. And if you look further, if you could look closely at the tree plantings here that are all lined up in nice little military rows, these were all slated to be clear cut. So the idea that some non-existent idea for a solar farm was going to come in and clear cut this area. Well, this area was already slated to be clear cut, and it's been clear cut many, many times over the decades. So just to recap, the DNR owns or administers 4.6 million acres of state land. According to the director, to date, fewer than 1,500 of those acres have been leased for solar development. It is contemplated that fewer than 4,000 acres eventually might be leased in total, which is less than the number of acres used for gas and oil wells on state lands. That is 4,000 acres would be less than 1,000th of the total holdings, and that would be degraded land. And just for comparison, timber companies log roughly 50,000 of those acres annually. And the one of the uses that the potential revenue would have been to purchase other land, not so degraded, better quality land elsewhere in the state, so that the net loss to taxpayers of available land would be zero. So none of this showed up in any of the social media outrage postings. Just for comparison, here is in green, you see that's state forest land, and the orange is oil and gas. Oil and gas storage leases on state forest land. No outrage from Fox News, no outrage from conservative legislators, no outrage from the Mackinac Center. Completely unsurprising, because it is the fossil fuel narrative that is driving this whole non-story. And let's see. Oops, already did that. There we go. And today, another shoe dropped where the DNR announced that they will be pausing future land leases on for solar arrays after the outcry. You know, to be continued. We shall see what happens. But part of what I'm trying to do is educate as many people as possible on how just how vacuous and false and just dishonest this story is. And I want to expose and embarrass all those people who have been spreading it. And I will continue to do so. So we have a new incoming president who has made a lot of promises, some would say threats, about what he's going to do to clean energy. And it's probably worthwhile for us to maybe review some of the promises or threats that he's made in the past. The other week he was threatening we're going to have no more windmills built. Whereas in 2017, he was saying he was going to revive the coal industry. And now, for some reason, he hardly ever mentions it. And maybe the reason is because coal has continued to die. And if anything, the death of coal accelerated under the last Trump administration because the forces behind the energy transition are market forces overwhelmingly. And coal is simply no longer competitive in the market because it kills people and it's really expensive to clean it up so it doesn't kill people. And so nobody wants to build it anymore. And that's the bottom line. Just to underline that, wind and solar beat coal generation on the US grid in 2024. You can see here the blue line is coal, steady downward over the last couple of decades. The gray line is gas. We are burning more gas. That is unsustainable. So we're going to have to deal with that. But if you look at the green line towards the bottom coming up, that's wind and solar. And that is going into an exponential growth phase. So, but we're going to have to work hard to make sure that that continues. In 2024, 96% of new power plants were carbon-free. So solar, batteries, and wind, primarily. Only a tiny bit of gas and nuclear coming online. And again, this is market-driven. People will tell you this is because of subsidies, but they forget that all forms of energy are subsidized. And even when you remove the subsidies, the cost advantages of solar and wind are greatly evident, grossly evident. So solar and wind are the lowest cost forms of energy, according to the Financial Times. Coal, more expensive, nuclear, more expensive still. There's an argument to be made that new forms of nuclear energy could be competitive in the coming decade. But we'll have to wait until at least 2030 before we even begin to find out whether that is true. Every indication is that they may well work. They may be viable, they may be safe, but they will not be cheap, at least not starting out. A General Electric executive, if you can go to my blog and see a recording of a General Electric executive saying that they hope that their nuclear design will by 2050 have the price down to about double of what solar and wind are at right now. And we expect that solar and wind will continue to decline in price and become more competitive. The other story that we are told is that renewable energy, solar and wind, are unreliable. They're costly and unreliable. So U.S. News and World Report did a very nice service for us a year ago. So I'm going to get out of this just for a second. I wanted to get rid of that line on my screen. And they did a survey of grid reliability, electric grid reliability by state. And if you look at that in the top 10, you see 4 states that have very, very high penetration of renewable energy. Nebraska, 37% renewable, mostly solar. South Dakota has, of course, a very small population, but a lot of wind and a lot of hydro. So 84% renewable. And it's number 2 in reliability. Nevada, 37%, mostly solar. Renewable energy, and very interesting, Iowa. And this is the number from last year is 66% renewable, mostly wind. That number is actually higher now. It's over 70% renewable energy in Iowa. Now, Michigan has 85% coal, gas, and nuclear. So if we believe the narrative that we hear from the fossil fuel interests and say the Mackinac Center, Michigan should have a very, very reliable grid because those are supposed to be the most reliable baseload sources of energy. But in fact, Michigan comes in a sad 43rd among states for electric reliability. Now, it's complicated. You'll be amazed to hear that the whole electrical grid is a very complicated issue and a complicated story. But the fact is that if you want to have a reliable grid, you can run it on renewables. Iowa's doing it. Germany's doing it. Germany's grid is 5 times as reliable as the United States grid. And as far as cost, in Iowa, residential electric customers are paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour. In Michigan, and I just checked this a couple of months ago, we are paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour. So we are paying 35% more in Michigan for energy that is much dirtier and much less reliable than what they're getting with 70% renewable energy in Iowa. So anybody can look these numbers up at the Energy Information Agency. But I try to keep people current on them, and they are consistent. I've been spending a lot of time with guys like this. Mike Cockrell is a farmer in White River Township, Michigan, which is in Muskegon County. There's a heck of a lot of farmers that see clean energy as a way to diversify their operation so that they can keep their farms in the family. A farmer told me just the other day that there's a saying that the first generation acquires the land, the second generation improves the land, and the third generation loses the land. And the last crop that any farmer ever grows on their land is houses. Because what invariably happens is that farmers are unable to meet their expenses on their land, and so they gradually start selling it off, and eventually they get surrounded and overcome by sprawl development. And this is the real threat to farmland and to open space and to species diversity and resilience that we see in Michigan and across the United States. And it's really one of the big reasons why I do this work, is because clean energy is how we're going to save farmland. But I'll let you listen to Mike Cockrell tell his story.
Like I said, I'm fourth generation, and my great-grandparents, my grandparents, my parents, and my wife and I have worked pretty hard for this land, and I don't want to sell it. If we had to sell the land, we would look for developers, because that would be a much better price than farmland price.
It's kind of ironic that the farmers are really what create the surroundings that draws people here.
Absolutely.
And if you lose the farmers, it just turns into another sprawl.
Right. And as I said, if we get to the point where we have to sell some land, we'll look at developing it.
Right, you have to.
You have to. I mean, the taxes keep going up. Yeah, it's a conundrum when you're trying to maintain that much property and pay the taxes on it.
I've heard these words. She just wants to get rich. But you know what? If I just wanted to get rich, I would have sold this land to developers and had subdivisions on our farm today. And I could have done it. A long time ago, I could have done it. I've been approached many times wanting that to go through.
We could sell out right now. I could make a few phone calls and I could be sitting on a pile of money and probably on a beach somewhere. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to let our next generations keep this legacy alive of the hard work our parents put in to get this land, and to share the love for it. And hopefully maybe someday it'll go back to that farmland, and that legacy will still be alive.
It's a huge issue that helping farmers make a living is a big part of the reason for bringing more clean energy onto the land. But another one in particular for solar, and I am shouting this to anybody that will listen. This is a press release about a 4-year study done at Argonne National Laboratory that showed that on 2 plots of solar farmland that was covered with solar in southern Minnesota and planted with native plants and pollinators, which is pretty much the standard practice nowadays, insect populations flourished over a period of 4 years. 2 solar sites studied for 4 years. They saw an increase in native plant species diversity and flower abundance, increases in the abundance and diversity of native insect pollinators and agriculturally beneficial insects. Total insects abundance tripled, while native bees showed a 20-fold increase in numbers. And pollinators from the solar sites also visited flowers and adjacent crop fields, providing additional pollination services above and beyond just the electricity and the revenue that's being provided from the solar. All of these services to the natural world of insects, small mammals, ground nesting birds, the bottom of the food chain, which is falling out. This is a big part of our extinction crisis that we have, is that we are killing off the bottom of the food chain. And solar arrays on farmland are one way where we can rest that land, rest those aquifers, and clean up those aquifers. There's actually research being done on solar fields that shows that the aquifers underneath those fields, when you stop spraying them with poison, you'll be amazed, those aquifers start to clean out. And the soil begins to regenerate, because those prairie plants, those native plants and pollinators tend to have much deeper roots than just the corn and wheat that we typically grow on that land. And so those roots bring water and nutrients and carbon down into the soil and will do so for the life of the project, if that's 25 or 30 or 35 years. So you're looking at the potential for this land after the solar is taken off to be much cleaner, much more productive, and much more like the soil that settlers initially found when they first came. So it's also key to be aware of this article, fascinating article in the Wall Street Journal, which I missed in November when it first came out. Trump's oil and gas donors don't really want to drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill is a great slogan that they like to yell at rallies and stuff. But in fact, the billionaires who are backing Donald Trump really aren't all that enthusiastic about drill, baby, drilling. It says the tycoons who backed the Republicans' victorious campaign say what they need is help shoring up the demand for their products. More on that later. Not pumping more fossil fuels, which they have little incentive. Our stocks would be absolutely crushed if we start growing our production the way Trump is talking about it, said one guy who gave $1 million to the campaign. There's also another limiting factor, which is drillers are running out of premium wells and they don't have the runway to pump more oil than they are already. The other factor is that we're seeing demand destruction for gasoline globally, and it's related to the rise of electric vehicles. China is the world's largest market for automobiles, and China is going for EVs much faster than anyone anticipated. Electrification is happening in China and globally at a rapid pace, despite what you might have heard in the media. And so here's the Energy Information Agency, the U.S. Energy Information Agency has exactly this graph, which shows the demand destruction in China. What you see there is gasoline demand over the course of years. The gray is the 5-year average. The pink is 2022. The red is 2023. And here's 2024. And it would appear it's maybe a little early to call it, but it may be that gasoline demand has peaked in China, which is a very, very, very big deal. And oil companies are aware of this. And that's why the gentleman said what we really need is for Mr. Trump to help us shore up demand, because they're concerned. Gasoline consumption in China has begun to fall in recent months amid increased sales of electric vehicles. And if you're wondering, Cox Automotive, which is the group that puts out the Kelley Blue Book, which you may be familiar with, said electric vehicle sales jumped higher in the last fourth quarter, pushing U.S. sales to a record. The fourth quarter sales of EVs in the U.S. jumped 15% over the previous year, setting a new volume record. So that's all happening. And so the major work that I'm doing and the work that I want to talk to you about is pushing back against misinformation, such as we've seen recently and what I've described. But NPR reported more than a year ago about groups that are deliberately spreading misinformation to stop solar projects, and I would say also wind projects across rural America. And they said local groups popping up in different places, but they're all saying the same things, using the same materials. The signs all look the same. The Facebook memes all look the same. It would appear that these are all being centrally organized. And in fact, that is the case. We know that to be true. And just a second. Hang on.
There are these organizers that come in.
Sorry about that. I had a screen freeze for just a second. I want to introduce you to Jed Welder. Jed is a farmer in Macomb County, Michigan, which has been a hotbed for misinformation, disinformation, and as well as harassment, abuse, and physical threats against farmers who wish to have clean energy on their land. Jed is one of the most respected men in the community. He's a 20-year Army veteran. He was a ranger, spent a lot of time doing things. I'm told that he would have to kill you if he told you about him, he'd have to kill you. But he's a heck of a good guy. He's become a friend. And he tells a story that is absolutely consistent from one end of the state to the other and all across the Midwest. Dang it. I'm sorry.
There are these organizers that come in that are totally invested in the destruction of wind and solar and the destruction of local communities that might support it.
Those people don't have good intentions, and those people have a certain agenda. Those people come into these rural communities and tear them apart and leave. That's real.
These either national groups or state level groups that come in and help these advocates organize, and they have a template. All the signs that they put up on the roadside and all the websites look the same, and they're the same stock photos of a wind turbine on fire that have been used hundreds and hundreds of times over.
If you look at the things that are being presented on our community, you'll see those same exact tactics, whether it's in Ohio or Indiana or wherever you're talking about. Same exact information being shared Facebook to Facebook, same stuff being shared at township meetings. That's the scary part.
I honestly don't think that the neighborhood people thought this up by themselves. I said right from the start that you guys are being coached.
A lot of the stuff that they ask, you like, where'd you hear that from, or how do you know that, or they're being coached.
I'd been on that Palace Planning Commission for the 20 years or whatever. We had never had an issue such as this come to be, and I think they're being, I don't know if coached, you want to say, or influenced from a higher up entity.
Somebody must be encouraging them to make sure that they have something to say about it, trying to talk it down.
And they have this set piece where they come in and they tell these groups that they have to overwhelm the townships with emotion and flash mobs and near riots and yelling and screaming and intimidating local elected officials, intimidating farmers, intimidating anyone who stands up for property rights and stands up for what we believe might be the future.
So with that, what I want to offer to you is this. Very often as I get towards the end of a presentation, the common question that people ask me is, what can I do? And I know there must be a lot of people, particularly following the last election, that are angry, discouraged, confused, depressed, want to withdraw. But at the same time, there's a recognition that we really can't completely withdraw. But what can we do? And we still have a lot of levers of control locally and at the state level. And that's where this battle is really being fought. This is where the battle is going to be won or lost, is how rapidly can we deploy clean energy across the Midwest? And Michigan is one of the primary battlegrounds. And so I have been working with people across the political spectrum. On the left, the Sierra Club, and on the right, the Michigan Conservative Energy Forum, and we've gotten together to create something called Michigan Homegrown Power. We have a website. You see the web address right there. And the idea is that there's people out there that really want to do something, and we want to empower them. So we have a training. We've already given this training to 100 people across the state, and we have it recorded. We have it available online. That gives people sort of the basics of how clean energy is sited at the county and township level. And then what we say to people is, what is your superpower? What is it that you feel you can do that is your real comfort zone? Can you write a letter? Can you write an email? Can you write something to a local newspaper or a legislator or a local official? Would you like to have coffee with one of your local officials and talk to them about energy issues? Would you like to post something on social media? We have tons and tons of resources like the ones that you've seen tonight that you can share on Facebook, on TikTok, or wherever you do your social media sharing. And we're really struggling because the antis, the anti-clean energy people are really good and really relentless at social media. And that's why so much misinformation can get so much traction. And we've not been good at it. We got to get better. So encouraging people to be active on social media and giving them the tools to do so. Encouraging people to go to meetings. If anybody is moved to go to a local meeting, we'll inform you. If you're part of our organization, we will inform you if there's a meeting near you that could be impactful for you to show up at and just listen or record, or if you're so moved, give a note to members of the board, or even stand up and you can speak for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes generally. And we'll give you a template of things that you can say. So there's a whole range of things you can do. And if you do go to a meeting, I'll pay for your gas. I've got a little bit of grant money, and you go to a meeting, you tell me, and I will send you a $25 or a $50 card to buy your gas and buy your lunch. So we're going to make this as easy as possible for people to do things that they feel comfortable doing in the service of something that we feel is really, really one of the most powerful and impactful and practical things that you can do. Because if you can be involved, as I have, in helping to get, say, wind or solar sited, like a single wind farm is the same as taking hundreds of thousands of cars off the road. This is something that is eminently practical. It's available to you, and you can do it right in your community. So what we're asking people to do is visit the myhomegrownpower.com webpage. And if you are so moved, click the Join Our Mission button, and you can fill in your information, and then somebody will get back to you and point you to the training. It's about an hour. You can listen in on, and then we will keep you updated with good current information and organize you with other people in your area of the state, and then let you know when things come up. And it might not be that often. It might only be a few times during the year where there's something that you can do that is impactful. Or it could be something that maybe you do on social media once a week or twice a week, or at your complete leisure. But we're making all those things available. So I want to offer that to you. I hope you will just make a note and consider visiting the webpage, and consider joining us, because I think just speaking from personal experience, it is just a huge psychological lift to actually do something that is practical, that puts you in contact with other people around the state, that gets us talking to each other and speaking across geographical and political boundaries, and is really one of the most constructive things that any of us can do. And so, like I said, many of you may be discouraged, you may be depressed, you may be motivated by concerns about climate change, you may be motivated by just wanting more clean energy, or you may just hate Donald Trump and the fossil fuel industry. So whatever your reason is for getting involved in this, I know I have my reasons, and recently I just had maybe the most important one ever. Had my first, sorry, I always lose it. My first grandson born about 8 months ago, Finnegan Rye Sinclair, and I can't sleep. If I didn't know I was doing something for Finnegan to make the planet as livable for him as it has been for me. I'm sorry. I really thought I had practiced this enough that I wasn't gonna get emotional. But yeah, that's it. So you can go right away to win101.info or sun101.org, where I have a whole lot of really good resources that are shareable now on social media. I encourage you to just take anything that's there, grab the link, put it on Facebook, put it on your favorite social media site, and then walk away. Don't argue with trolls. Just put some good information up there and then come back tomorrow or a week from now and put up some more good information. That's the best way. And if we can get 100 people doing that on a regular basis, it's going to be a game changer. You can also check out my blog, think.blog, THINC.blog. I am no longer on Twitter or whatever they're calling that hellhole now. I am on Blue Sky. You can check me out on Blue Sky. And you can also find me on Facebook. And there is a Wind 101 and Sun 101 on Facebook as well, where I post regularly stuff that is also shareable there. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap it here, and maybe we can just have some Q&A period. And perhaps I can, if I've missed anything, I can. I'm trying to stop the share, and there we go. Okay, I'm having some screen freezes here. There we go. Okay, we are back.
All right. So anybody have any, well, first of all, let me say thank you, Peter. This is a really informative and terrifying, but mostly informative and hopeful presentation, because there are things that we can do. You know, I did go to try to look at your at that website that you mentioned, and it's offline right now, so you might want to get that checked out. And
okay.
And we can when we're going to email everybody that attended here with a link to this recording, and I'll put the email in the or the website address in that email, and I'm sure that by the time you get that, they'll probably look at the website and get it fixed.
Oh wow, yeah, it looks like they are fixing it. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So, and does anybody have any questions? Just feel free to, you can raise your hand with a little icon, or even just unmute yourself and ask.
Well, I've got a question. Why does there seem to be so much emphasis on EVs, which the infrastructure is just not there yet, and they tend to be more expensive than hybrids? Like, for example, my soulmate just bought a hybrid Volvo a couple of years ago, and I think she's filled up the tank maybe 3 or 4 times. I mean,
It's a plug-in hybrid.
It's a plug-in hybrid.
Plug-in hybrid. Yeah, yeah.
So why wouldn't the US be pushing plug-in hybrids or hybrids to because people, they're more affordable. Probably 90% of the time people are going to plug it in, and they'll only fill up the tank when they're going on a longer trip, which is, rare for most people.
I'm with you. And in fact, I think Ford just made an announcement that they are going to pivot to a broader mix of hybrids for the medium term, plug-in hybrids, which I think is a really great idea. Frankly, I've been driving a Prius. We've had Priuses for quite a long time, and we went into the local Toyota dealer in Bay City about a year ago, and ready to buy the newest plug-in hybrid Prius, which was highly rated as a car, and they said, sorry, we don't have them. You can't have them. They only sell those out in California and New York. and we don't get any of them here in Michigan. And I said,
Makes sense.
excuse me, but if you've got a car that's so popular you can't keep it on the lot, wouldn't you want to make more of them? And he just sort of shrugged, you know. So it's a mystery to me. But you know, I totally agree. You know, there are going to be more plug-in hybrids available because I think there is some demand. There is also going to be an increasing, an accelerating build out of infrastructure. My most recent information is that we're seeing 1,000 new charging points every week in the United States. So that infrastructure is coming, and most people, you know, certainly not, I wouldn't say it's, you know, widespread in places like northern Michigan, but certainly in most of the urban areas around the country, and certainly for anybody that owns a home, the charging is pretty trivial. And I think I heard some people express range anxiety a few years ago, but I'm hearing that less and less as the people get sort of more used to what the infrastructure is and where it is and how to find it, and et cetera. So, you know, should we have more plugins? Absolutely. I'd be driving one if I could buy one, you know. And are EVs coming probably faster than a lot of people think? Yeah, because when we look back historically over, when we look at technological change, the change from horseless carriages to Model Ts, you know, the change from the change to like adopting radio and washing machines and television, you know, color television, you know, the internet, all of these changes sort of have the same kind of a curve. It's called an S curve, and in every case, it's very, very consistent. Those big changes take place over about 15 years. And if you look at 100 years ago, we made the switch where there's a very famous picture of New York City. I think the first picture is in 1903, and you look at New York City and you see all of these carriages with horses. And then the game is, can you spot the automobile? And there's one automobile in there, and it's very hard to see. And then there's a picture 10 years later, and it's the same street, except the game is, can you spot the horse and carriage? Because we've been completely switched over during that 15-year period, and significantly, you know, during that period where that, you know, between about 1910 and 1920, we made that huge technological shift. We built out roads, we built out gas stations, we went from horse and buggies to horseless carriages to Model Ts. We also fought a world war, and we had, you know, a global pandemic during the same time, you know. So those technological changes, once they kind of get rolling, they have a logic and a momentum that is kind of all of their own, that historically is just consistent again and again and again. So you're right, but, you know, we have to, you know, keep our eyes open and keep sharing good information and just continue to make it happen.
I mean, kind of along the same lines, I'm wondering if there's something that can be done to encourage the U.S. automotive industry to get rid of the planned obsolescence and make reliable cars. I mean, I drive a Toyota Camry. It's coming up on 300,000 miles.
Sure.
So how, and I get maybe 26, 28 miles a gallon. How green is that? I'm buying one car instead of three.
Totally agree. And moving to EVs, since, you know, combustion vehicles will typically have like thousands of parts, whereas EVs are so much simpler. They literally have maybe dozens, if not maybe 100 parts, as opposed to the much more complex internal combustion vehicles. So they're going to be much more reliable. You know, they're going to be much more, they're going to last a whole lot longer. And the batteries are now reaching the point where we're talking about 500,000 miles or 1,000,000 miles
Oh, really?
on these batteries. And the cost of batteries this is the thing that a lot of people don't know. The cost of batteries has dropped about 50% in the last year, and it's going to drop 50% in the next year and a half. So we're looking at very, very inexpensive electric vehicles, particularly coming out of China. And they're going to find their way here, whether it's through Mexico or some other way. So if our auto companies don't make some pretty rapid improvements, I'm really worried about the health of our economy and our industrial base here in the United States.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So before Peter does ask, somebody mentioned that if you take out the dashes in that website, it works. So I
Is that right?
pasted
Okay.
that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I pasted that in the link or in
Okay.
in the chat there. So
okay,
you can
good.
find
Well,
it.
that was all right. So they kind of pulled the rug on me. That was my feedback to them the other day is, hey, change that web address, take out the dashes.
Yeah, and they did it. Yeah.
And they did it. Okay.
Yep.
So good on them.
All right. It looks like Margot's got a question.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I drove a Prius. I had two Priuses for about 20 years. Loved them. They were great.
Yeah.
And then I bought my first EV.
Oh, yeah.
And they're simpler. They don't have two systems.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all just electric. And so I've had it for over 2 years. I love it. I will never drive anything else. You just come home, plug your car in. And if
Yeah.
I want to take a trip, you just find out where the charging stations are. I've taken it, I live in southeastern Michigan. I've taken it up
Yeah.
north multiple times. I've taken it to Wisconsin.
Sure.
More and more charging stations. I mean, they're amazing. Yeah. And they're fun to drive. Yeah.
This is it. People that
Yeah.
go to electrics tend to love them. And what kind do you have, if I may?
I have a Kia EV6.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
And it, admittedly, it was more expensive than my Priuses. Absolutely.
Sure.
But it costs almost nothing to drive it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're going to see sub $25,000 EVs sooner than anybody imagines.
Yeah.
And once that happens, it's just going to be an absolute stampede because they're so much nicer. I don't own one, but I have been fortunate to drive a few of them, and
they're so fun to drive. They're smooth, the acceleration. I mean, they're amazing. If
Right.
you've never driven one, go drive one.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions?
I have one more if nobody else has anything.
Yeah, jump in.
Okay, so we have solar on our roof, and we were told like if we wanted to go off grid, we could do whatever we wanted pretty much. But having the power company buy the solar from us, so we don't have to store batteries in the house, they limited the amount of panels we could put on the roof.
Yep.
So why is there? I know they still want to be able to make money, but I mean if they could sell any excess solar that we produce to their clients, they would be making money, and I don't quite understand the logic there, and I'd love to be able to get a few more panels up there, without just to be more green.
Yeah, sure.
We're not producing 100% of our power.
Yeah, I get it. Well, okay. So the solar, I divide it into 3 buckets. One bucket is like your solar panels on your house or somebody's solar on their business, say, a relatively small system. The next bucket would be what you might call community solar, like if you've ever seen the solar that's on the parking lot down at Michigan State, or, some kind of middle level, a few megawatts, maybe up to 20 megawatts, you'd call that community solar. And so that's another bucket. And the third bucket is the utility scale solar, which is hundreds of acres, hundreds of megawatts. And that is the one where we really have figured it out as far as the regulatory structure, how everybody gets paid, the utilities feel comfortable with it. It took a long time to get them comfortable with that, and now they are. And that is the economies of scale are definitely there. There are problems with the community scale because people want to build them, and you run into problems like, okay, who's going to do the work? Because if it's a utility scale, it's very easy to sell that to like the unions, because they typically do really well on some of these large projects because they work with the big contractors and stuff. Some of the smaller community scale ones historically have not always used like union labor and stuff. So it's harder to get that regulatory structure pushed through the legislature because you don't have quite the political coalition that you did for the utility scale. Okay, we're working on it, but it's just not quite there. There is an institutional inertia in the utility system, and in part that's a good thing because we want them to be sort of conservative and like really careful, because we don't want the lights to go off. We want to be very sure that our system is stable. So that's understandable, but we also have to find a way to push them a little bit to understand that that this is coming. And then in particular, because the price of batteries are dropping like a stone, what is going to happen is that within a relatively short time, it's going to be affordable for someone like me to buy probably a 12 or 15 kilowatt battery and put it in my house. And then I will store the energy at night when it's really cheap. And I will use my battery during the peak hours of the day when it's more expensive. Remember that 2 to 7 window when you're paying more for your electricity. And the utilities will be in deep trouble if enough of their customers start doing that. So they're gonna get it eventually. It took a long time to get them to where we got them now with the utility scale. It's gonna take a few more years to get them to these smaller scale. So, yep, make sure you mute it out there.
That's me.
Yep. Anybody else?
I don't know. Am I live?
Yes, go
I
ahead,
can hear you.
Ann.
All right. Peter, we thank you so much for giving us your time and your expertise. As long as NMEAC's been involved in this, we can still learn from you because you're a person who doesn't give up and whose passion just goes on and on. I'm wondering if you would consider an in-person program up here at some point. We have a City Light and Power administrator now who is very much into this, but the city commission
She's been listening. Brandy Ekman has been on.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all I wanted to ask.
Well, you don't have to beat me to get me to come up to Traverse City. I'm always open for opportunities.
Good.
So just let me
We'll
know.
be in touch.
Can I say one little thing here to tie into your batteries and things like that? I'll leave it on.
Sure.
I've been experimenting. It just started a couple years ago. I got some small panels. I got some bigger ones, but I didn't plug them in. And I got some basic car batteries plugged in my, set up a little thing there, and it keeps them charged. And I thought, well, I'd like to get a generator, like for backup power if you lose power, so you can run your refrigerator and other things. And I got enough batteries there to run it for less than it would cost to buy a generator. And I don't have to spend, 5 gallons of gas every day to keep a generator running. So
it sounds great, but not everybody's as handy as you, man.
Well, that's, I'm just saying, but it's that same sort of idea. If you know,
Yeah.
well, eventually, instead of having car batteries, you'll have a utility type size, one or something like
Sure.
that.
Well, that's exactly what's happening. And you're seeing these emergency batteries pop up. You can see advertisements for them everywhere, and they're gradually getting more and more powerful and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And you can just see it even, in 6 months increments, you can see the changes. So it's inevitable that those are going to become like household appliances that will be just standard. So that's something utilities have to be aware of, and I think it's going to be to our benefit that they'll gradually make it easier and easier for us to all become self generators, or at least people that can store our own energy.
Yeah.
I wanted to add just one more thing to all of the folks out there who are in a township. Plan on going to your township board meetings. Look up their ordinance on solar and wind, and you'll find that most of them are trying to prohibit it. So getting involved in the townships is critical.
Yeah, and it's cheap entertainment.
Yeah.
Really, lots of fun, lots of real life. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, they like to quote the Mackinac Center.
Oh, yeah.
In Leelanau County.
Yeah.
Looks like Len's got a question. Len?
Peter, if all of these oil and gas disruptors are operating off of the same script,
yes,
isn't it very convenient to develop a list of penetrating questions that take them off their footprint and some contrasting data that makes their arguments ineffective?
Well, I won't say it's like easy, but that's what I've been doing for the last 18 years or so. And that's what, wind101.info, sun101.org. That's where you can find a whole lot of like good stuff for that. I was on a TV interview show with a gentleman from the Mackinac Center a month or so ago. And boy, he got really mad at me.
Huh.
He really kind of lost his cool because I just, I wasn't playing by his script and I guess giving him the kind of deference that he was used to. But yeah, you can inform yourself, and you can you start by finding out the resources that I've created that are already there, and familiarizing those with familiarizing yourself with those, and maybe sharing them on social media, so you'll kind of commit them to memory a little bit. And then if you do find yourself in a meeting, or maybe just at the water cooler with somebody shooting the breeze, you can have some informed things to say that you can back up with real credible sources.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like the farmer that you showcased.
Yeah, right.
A farmer that's well informed, that just takes one of these charlatans apart would do a whole lot for the rest of the community.
Yeah, well, and I'm really trying to showcase those farmers, and it's a really fascinating and rewarding process for me, because these guys know that I'm not a conservative Republican. They're all conservative Republicans, really conservative,
Yes.
and they know that I'm not. But they also know, because I've proven it to them over years, is that I show up. I'm not there to grandstand. I'm not there to shine a light on me. I am there to help them and support them in whatever way that I can to get that wind turbine or to get those solar panels. And I'm not there to convert them about climate change or or their pronouns or anything else. You know, I'm just there to help and to dialogue on a common value that we have. And I would just recommend that to anybody who's like maybe losing faith in the American people. I think that even if there was no climate change, this would be one of the most important dialogues we could possibly have, just from the standpoint of democracy and having people talk to each other and solve problems the way we used to, instead of shouting each other down and shutting each other out.
And talk about issues and facts rather than politics.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Is there some way we can get a copy of your slides?
I can, they keep changing. If there's some specific ones that you would, you'd like me to share, you can contact me through my blog or through Wind 101 or Sun 101, or get a hold of NMEAC. They know how to get a hold of me. And, I don't just like sort of willy-nilly put things out there, because there's a whole lot of every slide has a whole lot of kind of knowledge that goes behind it, above and beyond the narrative. And it's there's no real magic power in the slides. It's really in sort of building in the knowledge that goes with them. But yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, no, the slides you had about the renewable energy being lower cost and
oh yeah, sure,
very reliable, those couple, I think just kind of speak for themselves. And
exactly. Yeah. Well, those are certainly, I can certainly
very compelling.
share those, right? Exactly.
So you'll see when you signed up for the email, the response email that you got will have Peter's email in there, so you can shoot him an email.
Oh,
all right. So it looks like we're getting to the end of our time here, folks. Before we go, I just wanted to just lift up a couple things. You all know that many of us are working on the Line 5 oil pipeline in the Straits of Mackinac. And there were two big Line 5 things that happened recently. Just a couple days ago, the Michigan Public Service Commission permit that was issued back in 2013 for the MPSC to put the pipeline, or put the pipeline into a tunnel, it was appealed by Michigan Climate Action Network, the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and they had oral arguments in the Court of Appeals last Tuesday. And the Michigan Climate Action Network has put together a sign-on letter looking for citizens to sign on. I just dropped it in the chat right there. I encourage you to click on that link, and when we're finished, go ahead and add your name to that, or read that letter. And if you agree with it, go ahead and add your name to it. We want to get thousands of signatures asking them to listen to the science and to deny the pipeline construction because of climate change, and also obviously because of the Great Lakes. A second thing that's going on, one of the first permits that was issued for the tunnel was by the Michigan Department of Energy and Great Lakes, and the tribes have appealed that decision to award that permit, and Enbridge has agreed to resubmit to get the permit again. They're gonna tear up the permit that they have from Eagle, and we're asking Phil Roos, who runs Eagle, and Governor Whitmer to step in and evaluate that permit request in with all the knowledge and science that we have about how it's not a good thing for Michigan. And we're asking people to sign on. And here's another, this is an oil and water don't mix link that you can go ahead and add your name to that email, sending an email to Governor Whitmer and Phil Roos, asking them to deny that permit that they need for that tunnel. So those are the two big items from the pipeline fight. I just wanted to thank Peter Sinclair for coming and educating us all. I learned a lot. We always do. And look for your email. We'll send a link of this webinar so you can look at it again and share it if you like. We thank you so much for joining us and the Northern Michigan Environmental Action Council, people that are working their butts off to make sure that we have a planet to live on. So thank you so much, everybody.